We're live.
Thank you, Carolyn. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our board meeting of March the 21st, 2022. Spring has arrived. I will call this meeting to order. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and our schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, we learn, and we live. We will now sing or play O Canada.
Épopée
des plus brillantes exploits.
God keep our land.
Glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for
Thank you to our students for leading us in the singing of O Canada. That was wonderful. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. We have an agenda in front of us. Could I have a motion to approve that agenda, please? Trustee Lundquist, seconded by Trustee Edwards. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on, we have two sets of minutes in front of us. I would like one motion to receive the approved minutes of January 17th and motion to approve the draft minutes of February 22nd. Could I have someone put forward that motion, please? Thank you, Trustee Templeton, seconded by Trustee Forbes. All those in favor? Thank you. Do we have any community presentations this evening?
I don't believe so, Chair Morton.
Thank you kindly. Then we will move on to ministry memorandums. Director Marsh.
Thank you. And through you, just wanted to make sure the trustees were aware that the Ministry of Education has advised us that they'll be releasing new curriculum, in particular the science and technology curriculum from grades 1 to grade 8. The last time it was reviewed and renewed was 2008. Their plan is to release it at some point this spring for implementation next September. In addition to that, they're also going to release a new inclusive grade 9 science curriculum and addenda in terms of the grade 10 mathematics curriculum. So just wanted to make you aware of those upcoming changes. We certainly look forward to getting the curriculum documents and then working with educators in terms of those changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Moving on to number 9, public question period. We have received some questions from community members this evening. We will take our first question from Dylan, who is attending this evening. And following Dylan's question, there will be one question which will be read for staff to respond. The first question, Dylan, I'm going to invite you to ask your question. And Dylan has arrived. Welcome, Dylan.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the public question period for March 21st, 2022. And my question tonight is, back 2 months ago, back on January the 17th, you guys released a report about the bell time review showing, and since then it went out to consultation. But now I want to ask about what are the plans for some of these secondary schools that are planning to either move to 8 a.m. or stick with the 10 to 4? Is that something that how will that potentially impact small class placements and the mainstream students? So that's all for my first question. I would have you allow you to pass it over to Director Mark or Associate Director Wright.
Talk slowly.
I think Director Marsh will be answering your question, Dylan.
Thank you for the question, Dylan. So as you know, the bell time review consultation has been underway. A report will come back to board in terms of the recommendations around the bell time review. What we do in terms of all students at every school, we want them starting as close to the same time as possible. Sometimes there's some very specific situations that might delay a bus from time to time, but generally speaking, we would want all students starting their school day at the same time because we think that opportunity to be participating in opening exercises together is always an important one. And we would be introducing it for all schools at the same time. So we wouldn't be doing a phased in report because the bell time review is dependent on the connection between the schools because the same bus services different schools. And so as soon as we change one bell time for one school, it has a relationship, it impacts the start time for other schools, which is one of the reasons why secondary has been impacted the way it has been in terms of a 10 a.m. start currently and the potential of an 8 a.m. start next year. It's because we have to do 4 runs every morning to get students from different schools to their schools. So each bus does 4 different schools as part of their morning. So I hope that answers your question, Dylan.
Well, I do have a supplemental question as well.
Then let's have your supplemental question, Dylan.
Well, you know, it shows in the report, it shows the bell time, the existing bell times from 2019-20, but we must acknowledge that the last time the existing bell times were actually in place was actually back in September of 2020 when the smaller class placements were starting earlier. So I'm wondering if some schools consider moving to 8 a.m. and some schools moving to 10 a.m. Would that exception apply again like it did last school year?
Dylan, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question this time.
I think the last time the existing bell times were in place was back in September of 2020. But since that time period, since we left the half-day model at secondary, we have been seeing a lot of traffic around Pine Ridge and saying that it had really impacted busing really significantly for small classes.
I think, so what I'm going to do is ask Superintendent Macaulay, who knows a little bit more around the schedule of small class placements. I think she has a few things that she wishes to say that she thinks might be helpful.
Good evening, Dylan. Nice to see you. In your reference to September 2020, the students who were accessing through special education classes came in a bit earlier because they were accessing a full day of in-school learning, while peers in the mainstream were on a modified day and a reduced number of hours. So that's why the bell times were different. When we look at this September and bell time changes, as Director Marsh said, it's really, really important for the start of day to be aligned, but it's also really important for integration too, because the periods need to line up so that yourself and your peers, as you're moving between your two class environments, have the same bell times for your classes to line up.
Well, it's very nice to say that you guys have had me here, but I just want to say that today we want to acknowledge that we no longer have mask mandates in our schools anymore.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye,
tonight.
guys.
Goodbye,
See you in
Dylan.
April.
Thank you. And we do have a second question, but we're going to call on Executive Lead Sir Janik to read aloud that question for staff to respond.
Thank you, Chair Morton. This question is from Alicia seeking clarification about learning preference selection of in-person learning or virtual learning through DDSB at home for the 2022-23 school year. She's asking about the March 27th closing date of the selection process, given some of the recent changes to COVID-19 safety measures by the province and any pandemic-related impacts between now and the start of the next school year. She's asking if there'll be a second window before the start of the next school year for families to confirm their learning preference choice. And I'll turn it over to Director Marsh, who I believe will respond.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the question. So we, this year, like last year, secondary, we did not provide an opportunity in terms of a full-scale re-registration because doing the timetable after we've already done the timetable is not possible without impacting all secondary students losing the timetable that they had to then rebuild timetables. So it's a consistent measure this year going into next year as it was for this year. At elementary, we did provide an opportunity and we committed to an opportunity that once vaccinations were available, we would provide an opportunity to re-register based on where families wish to attend virtually or in person. What we have found is that over 95% of our families remain status quo this year in terms of not changing their registration choice. Going into next year, we anticipate that it's going to be somewhat similar or less restrictions than this year, but we're sort of living that reality right now. To reorganize the feedback from in-person families in relation to the disruption and the connection in terms of peers and relationship with teacher and educational staff within the classroom, people really felt it had a negative impact on them. And so our goal is to not reorganize. We'll always look at a case-by-case situation for a family, and where we can make it work, we will. But the plan this year is to do the registration now, do the timetabling, do the staffing, and move forward. And as I say, very few requests really in the big scheme of things this year, even with all of the changes that we experienced this year. Most families did stay with their original choice. Understand it can be challenging, and so we'll continue to work on those case-by-case situations as they arise.
Was there a supplemental?
That's all, Chair Morton, and happy to turn it back over to you.
Thank you kindly. So thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Alicia, for bringing forth those questions. And thank you, Executive Lead Sir Janik, for posing the question. Let's move on now to item number 10. Are there any presentations? I see Director Marsh's head shaking no, so we'll move to 11. The report from the Committee of the Whole in camera. I'm going to go to Vice Chair Thatcher for that.
Thank you, Chair Morton, and through you, the board approved the actions of the Committee of the Whole in camera and adopted the motions made at the Committee of the Whole in camera meeting as follows. litigation affecting the board, an appointment of the external auditor, and property matters under the litigation heading. Chair Morton, this is my report.
And would you be willing to move the receipt of that report?
And I would move the receipt of that report.
Thank you kindly. Moving on, we all look forward to the good news from the system. Director Marsh.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to our student narrators to walk you through this month's good news. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of DDSB students and staff, we are happy to bring you good news from across the system.
A huge congratulations goes out to Jaden from Brooklyn Village Public School for his first place finish in the Caribou Math Contest in February. More than 3,000 Canadian grade 2 students participated in the contest. Amazing accomplishment, Jaden. We are so proud of you.
The Scugog Sports Hall of Fame will welcome a new slate of honorees in April. Among those being inducted are a slate of RH Cornish Public School teachers in the team category. Those coaches include John Hinch, Reg Phillip, Clive Roan, Rob Smart, Darla Thomas, Ken Smart, Wayne Addison, Jim Justinke, Graham Hewitt, and Dave Brownson. We are proud of the work our staff do in coaching, teaching, and mentoring young people in their chosen sport.
Two-time Olympic medalist and 7-time World Championships medalist for ice hockey, Jennifer Wakefield was a guest on the French as a Second Language Cultural Experience series. Staff and student alike were ecstatic to have alumni of Frenchman Bay Public School and Dumbarton High School as a guest. The event was broadcast to students and family entirely in French. The students and teachers at Valley Farm Public School were thrilled to host two-time Olympian and Pan American bronze medalist Pickering native Nikita Holder. She spoke to the students about hard work, resiliency, and the life as an athlete.
DDSB staff and students took the opportunity to celebrate the 2022 Winter Olympics by engaging in their own Olympic Games at school. Whether in the gym, on the field, or in the classroom, students exemplified the characteristics of teamwork, sportsmanship, and fun. Students at the EB Finn Public School participated in the Finn Olympics, an outdoor extravaganza of sport, teamwork, cooperation, and friendly competition. Events included snooker, also known as snow soccer, an obstacle course, noodle tag, and a hot chocolate station. Gym teacher Miss Jalel, together with every staff member at the school, created a phenomenal event that will live in the memories of students forever.
Sila Watkluche, an environmental, cultural, and human rights advocate, attended the first Indigenous Education Department Family Night in February. The department also hosted an evening with Dr. Pam Palmater and Mi'kmaq citizen and member of the Eel River Bar First Nation for their family night in March, and will continue to host ongoing conversations with prominent Indigenous speakers in the spring.
During the month of February, Meadowcrest Public School focused on the character trait of kindness. This inspired one of their senior kindergarten students, Lennox, who upon hearing a radio message about a child who didn't have enough to eat at lunch, asked his teacher how they could help. The class decided to host For the Love of Lunch food drive. Lennox and his classmates quickly got to work making posters and sharing the initiative with the school. A small bounty of items was collected through the drive and donated to Feed the Need in Durham. We are so proud of Lennox for showing empathy and kindness to the students in need in Durham region.
DDSB students and teachers across the district wore pink shirts on Wednesday, February 23rd, to raise awareness about anti-bullying, homophobia, and transphobia. Classes discussed the need to lift one another up and have a greater acceptance, respect, and inclusion for all of those around them. Wearing a pink shirt on this day shows victims of bullying that they are not alone, and there is help and support available.
Michael Jean Public School teacher Chantel Barman organized and led a group of students in grades 4 to 8 to celebrate Black History Month. The Lift Your Voice virtual choir performed a rendition of the popular Black national anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. The video can be viewed on the DDSB Facebook page. We congratulate Chantel and the students on a moving performance.
Schools across the district recognized and celebrated Black History Month. Students built interactive displays showcasing Black Canadian excellence, past and present, and created artwork inspired by Black artists. Students also learned about some of our inspirational school namesakes, including Viola Desmond, Lincoln Alexander, and Rosemary Brown. DDSB schools will continue to integrate Black history and excellence in learning throughout the year. GL Roberts CVI was very excited to host a Taste of Culture event. The Black Student Association, with staff sponsor Ms. Jennifer Post, provided an amazing experience for every student that included music, Jamaican patties, cocoa bread, and plantain chips. Joining in the festivities to serve lunch to students were Director Marsh, and Superintendents Negro and Crossdale. Thank you to the GL Roberts staff that helped make this event one to remember.
The dates of significance, as you can see, take us up to the end of April.
Thank you to Lillian Thomas from Port Perry High School for reading this month's good news.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Thomas, for sharing the good news stories. They were amazing and we love to hear those. Moving on to the recommended actions. The first one would be report from the standing committee, and I would go to Trustee Thatcher for that.
And thank you, Chair Morton, and through you. My report can be found on pages 31 to 35. I move that the board now receive the minutes and approve the actions of the March 7th, 2022 Standing Committee meeting.
Thank you. Could I have somebody second that motion? Thank you, Trustee Templeton. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to B, the authorization regarding trustee attendance at board meetings. Trustee Barnes has requested a leave of absence until June the 6th, 2022. To facilitate this absence, the board would need to pass a resolution authorizing Trustee Barnes to miss 3 consecutive regular board meetings, being the March meeting tonight, April board meeting, and May board meeting. I'm looking for somebody who would bring forward that motion to approve the letter, the leave of absence. Trustee Crawford, are you willing to make that motion?
Yes, by all means.
Thank you. Seconded by Trustee Barrett?
No, I had a question, not that I'm against the seconding, but I had a question with regards to the leave, but I'll wait till the seconder.
Could I have a seconder then? Trustee Crawford has put forward the motion. Trustee Stone, are you willing to second the motion? Thank you. Back to Trustee Barrett with a question.
Yeah, thank you. And my question was with regards to the definition of leave of absence, in the sense of what does that mean? A complete leave of absence from the board, in the sense, obviously, will no longer be attending board meetings, standing committee meetings. She's also co-chair of the Equity and Diversity Committee. Does her phone number, profile, etc., get removed from the website? Not that I'm trying to be able to do those things. I just think that we need to truly understand what that means for the leave of absence, because there are a number of positions that she holds that we may have to consider, like OPSPA, for example. She's one of our representatives. So I just wanted to understand the total context. Thank you.
I think we'll go to Council Cotter for an explanation of how a leave of absence works. Council Cotter?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. So the term leave of absence, I think, is probably a bit of a misnomer. All that the board can really do in a circumstance like this is excuse, or I should say authorize trustee to miss 3 consecutive board meetings. The other attendances really are not addressed in the Education Act or in our bylaws. So it would really be a matter, I think, of dealing with those on a case-by-case basis. If you needed either a temporary substitute, then the committee could address that, or if there was a move by a committee, for example, to replace the Trustee Barnes on one of those committees, that would have to be, as a chair, I should say, or a vice chair, then I think that would be dealt with at the committee level.
Does that answer your question, Trustee Barrett?
It does, and I know there are some circumstances. For example, she's the voting delegate at OPSPA. I think we would just have to define, because there are important votes, et cetera, that are coming up in OPSPA. We'll have to determine who the voting delegate would be. There's an alternate, for example, for that case. There's a co-chair of the Equity and Diversity Committee. So I mean, there are other elements. I just wanted to be able to clarify because there is obviously a role as vice chair of the committee of the whole, which also has responsibilities on agenda setting, for example, as well. So we'll have to decide as a board on what we determine, what we'd like to do to be able to temporarily fill those positions. So it clarifies. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Trustee Lundquist?
My question is not dissimilar, except it's related to constituency. So if, like, I'm just not clear on what a leave really means. And so I think the constituency of Ajax, where she's elected, might want to know what they do in the event of her inavailability, frankly. And I don't know the answer to that. Like, I don't want to suggest that it's all on Donna Edwards as the other trustee for Ajax. That doesn't seem reasonable, but I don't know what the answer is. If there's a trustee unavailable for months, what occurs?
Council Cotter, do you have a response?
Yeah, well, I think that would be, you know, there's nothing formal that needs to be done. It would be, I think, within the board's discretion to, for example, post an alternate contact for the area, for Trustee Barnes's area, but there's no need really to do anything formal in that regard. But I think it's, to your point, Trustee Lundquist, I think that would be within the board's discretion to signal where somebody may contact with concerns and that type of thing.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm wondering if Director Marsh wants to add to that explanation.
Through you, Chair Morton, I did want to say that I think when Trustee Barnes was speaking about missing the 3 board meetings, that there might still be some involvement for her with some other work that she does do. So for example, I think that she might still attend Equity and Diversity Committee meetings. And she didn't speak about the constituents within the area directly, but I think we could follow up if the board wished us to find out what her plan was there. But I think her concern was the 3 consecutive board meetings.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Trustee Crawford, your hand is up.
Yes, I think my questions may have been answered while I was waiting. I think that she should have a say in what she's going to do during this time. And of course, it's a board decision. And I think Councillor Cotter has given us the important information that we needed, that her job is protected.
Thank you. Moving on to Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. And I was just going to say, yeah, her, you know, I've had some discussion, and my understanding is that Trustee Barnes is going to continue on with a lot of her other endeavors. It was just a leave of absence for the three meetings, and we had a discussion just to ensure that if there was something that she could not attend, as usual, they usually, even though we are elected by wards, that we usually fill in for each other because we do represent Ajax and we do communicate back and forth. So that was about the only thing, but I agree that a discussion to ensure with Trustee Barnes on the other obligations that she has. And I mean, OPSPA, our voting position is already been stated that the alternate for the voting is there. So that position, we just have to inform, you know, OPSPA that the alternate voting member will be there from that perspective. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Barrett, Trustee Barrett.
Yes, thank you. I just think that we do need to clarify this with Trustee Barnes, because the information that you are relaying tonight is not the information that she shared with me. So there's a direct contradiction. I had a call with her this afternoon, and it was my understanding that based upon the nature of her absence, she was going to leave the duties behind. But I'm not going to speak for Trustee Barnes. So I might just recommend, certainly I have no issue with the leave, but I think that we need to be able to clarify it. And I certainly don't disagree that it needs to be done in conjunction with her. But the information that's being shared tonight is not the information that was shared with me at 4 o'clock. So that's why I'm confused on what the other parameters are. So yeah, I would encourage that a discussion take place.
I think the bottom line is I need to reach out to Trustee Barnes. We need to have an understanding of what she plans to do, what response.
Did we lose someone?
I was gonna say, I no longer hear the chair.
No, neither do I. So you're okay, Nikki. So
I think we totally lost her connection, it appears.
yeah.
So would it be agreeable if I just jump in until we get Carolyn back again? All right, okay. So I think that what Chair Morton was indicating is that she would follow up then with Trustee Barnes, and then we can deal with that matter after she's had the conversation. So I'd like to move on in the agenda then to item 13.
Sorry, Christine, we haven't taken a vote on that motion, so just FYI.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Trustee Barrett. So we have a motion. It is moved and seconded. Was that your motion, Michael? Whose motion was
No,
that?
it was mine. We just need to know there's no objection.
Okay, yes.
I think Trustee Lundquist.
We may have a question. Thank you, Michael. Trustee Lundquist, go ahead, Nikki.
So because this is political leave and I'm not clear on what the scope of the leave is, I'm uncomfortable with voting on something that I don't understand the parameters of. So I'm wondering if it's appropriate to seek to defer it to our next meeting until such time as Trustee Barnes advises us what her intention is, because I'm not clear what that is. So, you know, I've heard Trustee Barrett say he has a different understanding from what other trustees are saying, and she isn't here to speak to it. I don't know if we actually need to take other steps or not, but it seems to me important to clarify before we vote. So I would bring a motion to defer it into the next meeting so that we can take the time to clarify with Trustee Barnes.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. I'm just going to go to Trustee Edwards. Donna, go ahead.
I was going to suggest the same thing as Trustee Lundquist, is to defer the motion until the next meeting, because this is her first meeting that she has missed. She can miss whatever, and we can do that to get consultation with Trustee Barnes, and then so that we get a better understanding of what her leave is about. As far as the extent of her duties that she's leaving behind.
Yeah.
So that was a motion. I would second that.
I'm just wondering, that's I was going in the same direction as you. Just wondering, Trustee Lundquist, would you put that motion forward?
No, point of order.
Excuse me.
No, point of order. Point of order. You can't make a motion when there's a motion on the table that is in direct confrontation or not confrontation. Yes, that's right.
Could we then amend the motion? Nikki, how does that sound to you?
Amending is a much better option.
Yeah, so I would amend.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's absolutely right.
Yes.
So I see Councillor Cotter's hand up as well, but I guess what I would say is then I would seek to amend the motion such that I'd have to think, let me
go to Councillor Cotter.
Thank you, and then I can think it through.
Point of order, Madam Chair. It's quite right to postpone it. We should be discussing the postponement right now and what problems it might bring before we vote on it.
Trustee Crawford, we have your motion on the floor and a proposed amendment to that. So do you see?
No, you have a postponement on the floor.
I think the point, there was an effort to postpone it, and then there was an objection from Trustee Barrett on the motion to postpone. So in terms of how to handle that, Chair Thatcher, I think that in my view, the motion to postpone is a motion of precedence and can be addressed in advance of the main motion, which is to the motion for the leave of absence. So I think, I don't know if that motion's been formally tabled or not, because there was the objection, the procedural objection, but if that motion is tabled and seconded, I think my advice to you would be that would be a motion taking precedence over the main motion and could be addressed first. That would be a motion to postpone to the next, as I understand it, would be a motion to postpone to the next board meeting, I think.
Okay, so Council Cotter.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but my technology let me down a little bit, and I think I have missed something. We did have a motion on the floor put forward by Trustee Crawford. It was seconded. We had discussion. Are there people now thinking that we should not be voting on that motion?
That's correct. There was Trustee Lundquist, I think, had suggested possibly deferring the motion or postponing the motion. I'm not sure if she formally moved that, and Trustee Barrett then brought a point of order suggesting that we had to deal with the main motion first. So I was just providing some guidance to Chair Thatcher or Trustee Thatcher, who had assumed the role of presiding officer in your absence, but you're back now. So I think the question is there a motion to postpone on the floor? And if so, does it take precedence? I think it does take precedence, and I turn it back over to you to determine if that's actually been moved and seconded or not.
So Chair Morton, we have a motion put forward to postpone, put forward by Trustee Lundquist, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, seconded by Trustee Edwards. I'll just leave it with you now.
Is that correct, Trustee Lundquist? You would like to postpone?
Yes, I move to defer it so that we can consult with Trustee Barnes and understand the scope of her leave, because we were clearly on different pages. And I think Trustee Crawford made a point, which is a valid one, which is there any downside essentially to postponing it at this stage? Will that have an impact? My view is it wasn't, but I certainly am not, I'm not the arbiter of such things. So I understand the point. I'm not trying to prejudice her in any way, but it really is, I'm not clear on what the scope of this leave would look like in terms of the constituency, in terms of her responsibilities in other committees, and I would like that clarified before I'm asked to vote on whether I accept that or not.
So the first thing I need to do is connect with Trustee Barnes tomorrow and have that discussion with her. Trustee or Council Cotter, how would you suggest that we move on this?
I was just going to make some guidance on the motion. I think a motion to defer is indefinite. So I think it should be a motion to postpone to the next board meeting, if that's what I think what Trustee Lundquist's intent is.
That was my intent, Chair. I'm sorry.
And in terms of the timing, the question has been raised about the potential downside. The Education Act just says you can't miss 3 consecutive meetings. So if it's dealt with by the next meeting, there would be no prejudice to Trustee Barnes in that respect. It just would have to be dealt with before the June meeting.
Thank you. Trustee Barrett?
I'm going to yield to Trustee Brainy because he hasn't spoken on this issue and I already have, and so is Paul. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
We'll go to Trustee Brainy then. Chris?
Thank you, Chair Morton. This is a pretty major decision for us to make, and I definitely agree with the deferral because I don't have any information. If you are talking to her, I think the best approach to this, that all the trustees are in the loop on what her actual true intents are. So we take out the he said, she said. Perhaps she can put in writing, which I think would be a very respectful thing for her to do. This is a pretty major decision for the board to make. I think we all need the information. So I'm not opposed to her taking it. I just want to know what I'm voting for. And that's why I think it obviously the deferral is the only way to go right now, but maybe she could outline I think it would be nice for everybody on the board to receive the same communication so that we have an understanding from her exactly what it is that Trustee Barnes is asking for. Thank you.
I agree with you. Back to Trustee Barrett.
Yeah, I was only going to say though, because I don't disagree, because I mean, I raised the initial questions on what does a leave of absence consist of. The only thing I would say is that and I'm going to go back to what you talked about, Council Cotter, in the sense that what do we really have the authority to grant? We have the authority to grant a leave of absence. So what if she said, you know, I don't want to go hypothetical, but in the sense that if our only authority is to grant a leave of absence, not determining what that actually looks like, because there are no regulations within the Ed Act and bylaws, as you have pointed out, then I understand that perhaps Trustee Barnes will come back with, you know, parameters, but aren't we really just voting on whether or not a leave of absence, not necessarily the framework?
So through you, Chair Morton, as I indicated at the outset, I think the term leave of absence is a bit it's a bit loaded in terms of what that means, and it's, as you say, it's a bit difficult to unpack. I think for under the Education Act, all the board is required to do to preserve Trustee Barnes's seat is to authorize her to be absent from 3 consecutive board meetings. You know, beyond that, then her role as a trustee in terms of her engagement level or not is really within her discretion. The board, I don't think, could mandate anything there. They could have a suggestion in terms of an alternate contact, whether that's Trustee Edwards or not, but the board would be in no position to dictate the level of her involvement with the constituents, families in the district. You know, in terms of her attendance at committee meetings, I hear you. There may be some ambiguity in terms of what that looks like for her, whether she's plans to attend or not. My suggestion would be that those could be dealt with at the committee levels by nominating an alternate presiding officer, for example, in camera as you go. But in terms of the Education Act, Section 228 requires authorization to miss 3 consecutive meetings. We're obviously not there now, so there's no need to do that tonight. So you could get some more clarity in terms of scoping it out, but from the perspective of the Education Act, that's the critical issue.
Trustee Crawford, your hand is up.
Yes, I think we might be overdoing it on this, and we have to be very careful that we protect those 3 consecutive meetings, and one of them would be tonight's. And by postponing it, we might be putting that in danger, so to speak, so that she might require time later on and might not be able to get it. So I think Councillor sort of clarified that, but all she's really asking us to do is protect it, and she's already asked us to do that. I don't see why it shouldn't start tonight. So I can understand the idea of the postponement, so you can get all that information, but you're going to get all that information anyway, even if we vote tonight to protect her. So I'm not in favor of the postponement. And I am in favor of the suggestion that she write us, or write you, somebody, a letter indicating exactly what she'd like to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can understand those concerns, Trustee Crawford, because Trustee Barnes is simply asking us to provide her permission to be absent from 3 board meetings. So I'm of the inclination that we should have that vote. And then and I will definitely be connecting with her and asking for clarification that can be provided to all trustees. Trustee Stone?
Well, thank you. I just am totally in agreement with that. I think that we can vote on the 3 meetings tonight and then get more of the details at a later date.
Thank you, Trustee Stone. Trustee Lundquist?
Respectfully, Madam Chair, it's not your decision to make. It's a decision of the board. There is a motion on the floor. I would anticipate that it gets voted on. It might get voted down, and I'm fine with that. But I don't think you get to decide to not move a motion that has been moved and seconded.
Okay. So repeat your motion again, Trustee Lundquist.
So I brought a motion to defer the decision until the next board meeting so that sorry, I keep saying Forbes, and that's not wrong. I apologize. Trustee Barnes can be contacted to indicate the scope of her continued involvement over the course of the next 3 months.
Thank you.
That was seconded by Trustee Edwards.
Trustee Edwards. Then I am going to ask to go to stadium seating to have that vote taken. John, do you mind putting us into stadium seating for the vote? I will call the vote. Thank you. Kathy, could I ask you to repeat that motion, please? Or Rob?
Yes, I didn't get the last little bit of Trustee Lundquist's motion because it had changed a bit, but I had to postpone the authorization regarding trustee attendance at board meetings to the next board meeting so Trustee Barnes can be contacted. And then that next little bit.
So basically, it is a motion to postpone the vote. So if you are voting to postpone, you would use the green check mark. If you are opposed to that, you would use the red X. If you are abstaining, you would use neither. Please indicate one way or another. The way I am reading it, there are 5 people supporting the motion, 4 people who are opposing the motion, and it appears as though 1 person is abstaining from voting. Am I correct? Trustee Lundquist?
I would say that it does appear that way, but Trustee Crawford already has indicated he doesn't support it. So although he's not on the screen, I just want to be clear that I don't think that's reflecting his wishes. And there he is.
Okay. Thank you. I'm seeing then that we have a tie, 5-5.
Motion fails on a tie, Chair.
The motion has failed. Thank you. I'd like to remain in that stadium seating and go back to the original motion put forward by Trustee Crawford. Kathy, could you repeat the original motion, please?
Yes, that the Board of Trustees approve the resolution to authorize Trustee Barnes to miss 3 consecutive regular board meetings, being the March, April, and May meetings.
Thank you, Kathy. Again, if you are supporting that motion, it would be a green check mark. If you are opposing, the red X. If you are abstaining, you would use neither. And again, we have a tie vote, so that motion also fails.
If I could then make a recommendation in order to be able to advance this, I think the direction from the board is quite clear. We're still unsure, Madam Chair, of what the parameters are. And I would suggest we go back to the same element of the chair, directing the chair to be able to have conversations to further clarify, as Trustee Brainy, Trustee Crawford has agreed to have it in writing on what it concludes so that we can reconsider it. Otherwise, it has failed. So
Correct. I'm in complete agreement, and I will be contacting Trustee Barnes tomorrow. And hopefully we will have information coming forward as soon as possible. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on our agenda. Revised draft consolidated bylaws. And I'm going to go to Trustee Michael Barrett for that.
well, I hope we can be as brief and full of brevity on this as well as the last item, as he says, with tongue in cheek. So we do have the drafts before us. It is coming back for us for the second time. There was a number of changes and made at the last board meeting, recommendations for change that were incorporated in the latest draft. And as per the last methodology that we utilized, I was going to go through the draft bylaws section by section. I know that there was some concerns raised in some emails that came through the exchange, that this would be the time to be able to bring those concerns of each section by section. So if that seems like a fair process, trustees, that's what I will go forward with, similar to what we did the last time as well. And let me just get to my right page number here. My apologies. All the way to page 36. So what I will do is I will go through, as I said, section by section, and I'll start with the first section
I believe it's page 38, Trustee Barrett.
Yep, that's where I was just going to go. We are aligned. I was just going to move to page 38. Trustee Crawford.
Some clarity. I thought the last thing we did on this was gave notice of motion to bring it here. Did you mean that the changes that we had at a prior meeting are built into this one?
That's correct, Trustee Crawford. The last board meeting, there were, I'm only going to guess, there was 7 or 8 changes that were made in the first review. All of those elements have been incorporated into this latest version. And I'm looking at Patrick. If he nods his head, then I know I'm okay. Am I incorrect, Patrick?
Did I miss that meeting?
No, you were at that meeting, Trustee Crawford.
Yeah, as best as I can recall, Trustee Barrett, this is the latest draft. The clean version comes first, and then the track changes version against the original starts on page 71.
Correct, and that was my understanding as well when I reviewed it with the last version that we used at our last meeting. Patrick, I would be honest with you, I didn't check every single one. I checked a couple, they were there included. So I figured if you did one, Patrick, you did them all. So with all respect. So yes, Trustee Crawford, the changes that were made at the last board meeting did come forward and were part of this latest draft.
And we're talking about the changes that I submitted by email, I guess, are we?
Not the changes that you made, Trustee Crawford, no. They were not part of the last meeting. Most of the recommendations were put forward, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all of the recommendations were put forward by Trustee Lundquist, seconded and accepted. Any of the changes that you made outside the board meeting, this is your opportunity to be able to raise those as we go through these section by section.
Okay, I guess I've done a lot of work for nothing, because I took this as being an open document and have gone through it again. So if it's your wish that we start at 38. That's
Yeah.
where we'll go. That's where we'll go.
Yeah, and then you can add your comments with regards to any of the concerns or changes, and then we can consider any of those changes by putting forth motions as per the accepted process.
Yeah. I think one of the things I had suggested before was that we got into developing procedural rules, which wasn't our original intent. And it turned out that there's several pages of those, and those are the ones that concern me more, because procedural rules shouldn't be part of the bylaws. They should be handled separately. I can see I'm annoying you. I'm sorry, Michael.
No, you're not annoying me. I'm just saying that if we work through each one of the sections, Trustee Crawford, and then you can raise your concerns on the balance between policy and procedure as we work through the sections.
That's fine.
Yeah,
I'll go with that, Michael.
okay, I appreciate.
I'll go with that, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just taking care of this one at this point. So I'm going to start with page 38, the first section, which is just the I would call it the introduction preamble to the bylaws. Just seeking to see if there's any changes or amendments or concerns based on page 38.
Michael, I just need to open that. I was on the other one. If you just give me a moment.
Okay. You'll let me know when you're ready to go, Trustee Crawford.
I'm there.
Excellent. So we are looking at what I would call section 1 on page 38. Any concerns or questions on section 1? Okay, I don't see any. I'm going to move to section 2, roles and responsibilities. Okay, I'm just looking through. I see no hands for section 2. Section 3, which is the organizational meeting, starting on page 42. Not seeing any. I know we've certainly all had the opportunity to look at this multiple times. Page 44, section 4, committee structure and composition. Okay. I'm moving to section 5. Found on page 49, board and committee meetings, rules and procedures. Yes, Nikki.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I
Trustee
think-
Blomquist, sorry.
No, that's fine. I think I might be being pedantic, so I'd like to go back to 44 for a sec, just for my own clarity.
Sorry, we're past that page.
I know, but
Kidding, I'm kidding. Page 44 it is.
So I'm looking at 4.2 and then 4.21, committee of the whole and committee of the whole and committee of the whole standing. 4.21, the committee of the whole will be composed of all trustees. And I'm not clear on, does that include student trustees? Is that, I just want to be clear that whoever is reading this understands who that is in terms of the trustees. Does it, and I guess what I'm asking, because it happens in several places, do we need to clarify when student trustees are a part of trustees, or if they're a separate entity that needs to be included specifically? I'm just looking for some direction from council on that.
Yep, fair question. Council Cotter?
Thank you, and through you, Trustee Barrett. So the general approach, Trustee Lundquist, is to refer to trustees and members of the board, and to then separately carve out the unique role of student trustees rather than dealing with it individually. So to answer your question, student trustees would be members of the committee of the whole. But when the board would then move into, for example, if the board moved into closed session, then there's specific requirements for student trustees not to be in attendance depending on the nature of the issue being discussed in the closed session.
Okay, I think that answered the question, judging by the. Okay, yeah, okay, thank you. And also trustees, I mean, if we are looking at making amendments, which is fine, I'll probably have to go back to be able to have one motion to be able to approve the bylaws and then be able to make an amendment as well. So if we do that, and actually from a good procedural sense, we really probably should have a motion on the floor to adopt the bylaws as presented, and then we can make amendments as we go along through motions to amend the bylaws. So I think that would actually be a better procedural process. So if I could have a motion to be able to approve the bylaws as presented, Trustee Lundquist, if I could have a seconder to that motion, Trustee Templeton. Discussion to that motion. This is as much procedural at this point, but we are not going to carry that. Well, we're going to, I don't want to carry it because, help me here, Patrick, I don't want to carry it because we might make amendments to it.
Yeah, I think it's on the floor, and you're now reviewing, you're now reviewing it. Yeah, you're now reviewing it seriatim, paragraph by paragraph, section by section. And I think as the amendments come up, you would vote. And then I think at the end, you would then do a final motion to approve the as amended.
Right, perfect. Okay.
And I think at that point too, that would be open if somebody said, well, I want to make another amendment back in section 1.1, right? It could do it then too.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure we're moving forward. So moving back to committees, I just moved to page 49, section 5, board and committee meetings, rules and procedures. Comments or concerns with regards to section 5? Okay, seeing no hands on section 5, I'm just flipping through to section 6. I'll move on to section 6. Filling trustee vacancies, starting on page 62. Questions or concerns with section 6? Christine, Trustee Thatcher, sorry.
Sorry, Trustee Barrett, that section 5 was very long. I just wanted to mention that I do have some questions around the public participation in meetings on page 60. But what I was thinking is that it might be a longer discussion and something that we could include on the agenda for our governance committee meeting at some point.
Well, I thought that to your point, that part of that conversation could be to be able to approve the minutes as noted, and then potentially deal with the concerns that were being raised either through development of a procedure or even a potential amendment of that public participation in meetings. So we'll note that in the minutes. That's something we would come back to as opposed to being able to open up that whole section tonight, but noted and not lost.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Section 6, I'm now moving on to section 7, which is trustee determination and distribution. Fairly short section 7. Section 8, execution of documents and corporate seal. Any questions or amendments? Section 9, election of student trustees. Section 10, electronic meetings.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
Could I-
go
could I
ahead,
ask-
Crawford.
could you go back to section 5?
No, I'm well past section 5, Trustee Crawford. So I'm only kidding. What section do you, what part of section 5?
Okay, 5/12/29.
5/12/29. Let me just catch up to you, Trustee Crawford. 5/12/29. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Well, and I want to spend a minute on this if I could, because this is a section that I'm concerned with that I think should be separate from the bylaws. These are our meeting procedures. And there's several things in there. For instance, on page 25, debatable or motions that are not amendable. Motions that are not amendable include postpone consideration of a motion indefinitely, reconsider a previous decision of the board, temporarily suspend a provision of the bylaw. Well, you can't temporarily suspend a provision of a bylaw. I think what we're saying there is that if we run a procedures, you can suspend something within procedures.
It's my understanding, Trustee Crawford, that you do have the ability to be able to suspend a provision of the bylaws with a 2/3 vote. Am I misreading this?
No, you cannot suspend a bylaw under any circumstances. You can only amend them.
As if it's as, sorry, through you,
Yeah,
Chair, Trustee Barrett, I think you can suspend to the extent it's a procedural rule. I'm not sure Trustee Crawford would disagree with that, but you can't suspend a substantive provision of a bylaw. I would agree with that.
So are you then agreeing, Patrick, that 5/12/29E should not be included because it's not amendable?
Well, we could say, temporarily suspend a procedural provision of a bylaw. You could say that. The list is merely, the list doesn't really, but anyway, I think that would suffice. We could say temporarily suspend a procedural provision in a bylaw.
Okay, I see your hand, Nikki. Just give me 1 sec. Trustee Crawford, comments to that?
Well, it goes back to what I'm trying to emphasize, that you need to put procedural rules separate from your bylaws so that they don't get confused. And that's why this part of the document, I was hoping that we could treat it separately. Like it won't be within the bylaws, it'll be outside of the bylaws, because this is what we're going to use at our meetings, what we're going to do at our meetings. And so many of those can be suspended, but if you put them within your bylaws, then you're running into a problem of, can I suspend this or because it's a bylaw? There's several in section 5 that I could spend some time on. And I'm just wondering, I'd like to make a suggestion that, and I think that Trustee Lindquist said this before, even if we put these through, we have to, even though they're done and finished, we have to look at it carefully, especially this part of it, the procedural rules. And I'd like to remind people that even if we don't pass this tonight, or we don't pass it at all, we have bylaws in place that have been in place for many years and serving us for many years. And in fact, there's only one bylaw that we've amended of the group that we started with. So we're not without bylaws.
No, I don't think anyone is suggesting, Trustee Crawford, nor inferring that we don't have any bylaws. So
No, I'm just saying we don't necessarily need to, even though this hasn't been rushed, if we weren't to pass this tonight, it wouldn't make too much difference. We've got bylaws in place that are working.
Yeah.
And I'm only going to express my concern once, because I know people say I talk too much and they're not interested in what I have to say, but I am expressing, because I've had a lot of experience with this, that we have to be very careful with the procedural rules, and they should be separate from your bylaws.
Okay, so thank you for that. And I don't think that anybody's suggesting that they're not interested in what you're having to say, Trustee Crawford.
No, I'm only talking about actions.
Okay. Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you. So I have a somewhat different perspective, which I suspect isn't surprising. So I think that including more in terms of the bylaws actually gives trustees who don't have outside experience a clearer path in terms of understanding the way the board operates, functions. I understand the concern though, and I don't want to discount it, because I think that Trustee Crawford has a really valid point in terms of process and procedure and the ability to suspend bylaws versus rules. So there's an upside and a downside to it. To me, the upside is more significant in terms of having trustees understand the lay of the land in front of them. Trustee Crawford has spent some time with Robert's rules and is, got a lot of experience in that regard, but practically speaking, most trustees coming in don't. And so I think it's important that we have some clarity in an easily accessible document, frankly. So I don't object to them being there, but I am puzzling over this particular section about the amendment to a motion, because I don't know that that's going to be clear to trustees coming in reading it. So particularly when you stick in the word procedural in front of provision, because I think that's right. I think the process is something that can be amended always. You have the ability to do that. I'm just worried that there is a lack of clarity in that particular section. So while I am generally in support of the bylaws, I actually think they add a level of clarity. I do think there are some procedural sort of issues that might help to be clarified. I'm not suggesting that we don't pass the bylaws though. So I'm supporting what Trustee Crawford is saying in general terms, but I also think that they provide some degree of clarity. So I guess what I would like to understand very clearly in my own mind with respect to that particular provision, so suspending a procedural provision of the bylaw, what does that look like? And how, I understand that that's not a debatable or an amendable motion. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe I've talked myself into a place of understanding and I don't need a response. So this is the challenge, right? When you read a line separately and you disconnect it from the other pieces, it suddenly gets to be less clear. So I guess I'm going to just be quiet at this stage, because I've gone back and read what it's about and now I understand it and I don't need the clarification. But I do think at some stage, a process-driven document that sort of lays things out clearly would be beneficial in terms of helping new trustees and even incumbent trustees navigate these.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Lundquist, for that spirited debate. So
spirited nothing, I apologize, but I circled back and it all made sense suddenly, and I don't want to waste your time.
It was very interesting watching thinking out loud, which and the debate out loud worked out well. But I think that the premise certainly is, in a broad sense, that certainly that the greater amount of training, the greater amount of education, the greater amount of being able to ensure that trustees, whether, like you said, long tenured or incoming trustees, it's an important element to understand the bylaws and the parameters of being able to make decisions. I mean, whereas I may not have as much experience as Trustee Crawford on Robert's Rules of Order, I've learned enough that Robert's Rules of Order can be interpreted by 3 different people 3 different ways. So, and that's what I've learned, if nothing else, over 19 years as a trustee. With that, I was going to Trustee Crawford, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you're right about Robert's rules, and it takes a very careful reading of them. It's something like asking 2 lawyers a question.
We don't talk about lawyers at these meetings.
Yeah, lawyers do have a sense of humor, you know. Well, let me go on to explain what some of my concerns are, because I've highlighted them here. And we still haven't really answered the question, temporarily suspend a provision of the bylaws. You can temporarily suspend a provision of your procedural rules. And then going down the page, motion to refer, which is a motion to commit. It says here, a matter may be referred or committed to the board. No. Any committee of the board? Yes. The chair of the board? No. Or the director of education or designate? No.
What section are you on, Trustee Crawford?
Uh,
I'm on 5/12/31.
Okay, that's why
I'm staying on 5 because I know 5.
okay, well, that's good. I
Top
didn't
of
know,
page 58.
well, 5/12/31's on the bottom of my page 57.
Yeah. Well, it's on the bottom of my page 25.
All right, so, okay, continue the discussion. But Trustee Crawford, all I'm asking there is, the conversation in the sense of discussion is really, really good and it's helpful, but I am looking for recommendations for change. So like if there is something that you would like to be able to change in the piece, then looking for direction from that, So.
Well, I know someone's worked very hard at putting this together, and I think that probably we've even taken some ideas from other boards, which I've looked at them too, but sometimes we're taking bad ideas. And may I make a suggestion? Because we can go through here and amend this, and I guess that's what we should be doing. But all I could do in the case of this one is say that you can't commit something. You can commit something to a committee, but you can't commit it to the board or the chair or the director. So, I mean, what do you do with something like that? You'd have to eliminate 3 of those things. And it really requires much more attention. I'm going to suggest something that we just promise ourselves, if this gets done tonight. Boy, take it easy, Michael. If this gets done tonight, then at our next committee meeting or at a meeting, that we pay special attention to this section, because that's what we're going to be working with. And we'll probably find that we'll want to amend some of these things, and we could do it at that time.
All I'm going to suggest, Trustee Crawford, is we have been working on these bylaws for about 18 or 19 months. And that we have indeed, as staff and trustees, have put a great deal of effort into it. And so therefore, I don't disagree that bylaws are not static. I don't disagree that they always merit conversation. But all I would suggest is that the governance committee has worked diligently. As you said, there's been many fingerprints on this document, and we'll continue to be able to look at them and continue to be able to amend and to understand, because bylaws should be living and breathing documents. So, and if it is passed tonight, there's always the opportunity to be able to continue to look at it at the will of the trustees. So.
All right, then, Mr. Chair, I can see I'm wasting my time on this, so I'll not say anything more about this. I'll wait until we're debating the code of conduct, so I won't waste any more time on this.
Okay, not suggesting you're wasting time. Trustee Lundquist?
Yeah, I apologize because I seem to be lacking clarity that I thought I had when I sat down in this chair earlier this evening. So I'm looking at 5/12/32, the motion to refer, and Trustee Crawford has indicated that we can't refer matters to the board of committee, the chair, the director, and I'm not clear on why that would be. So I'm hoping that Council Cotter could speak to that, because I don't see an issue with that. Like, you know, a committee could refer it over to the board. I just don't see where there is an issue, but if I'm missing something, I would be happy to understand it better.
I would have to defer to Trustee Crawford, Trustee Lundquist to raise the issue. I don't see an issue with the clause as drafted, but happy, you know, to entertain that feedback either tonight or if it goes back to the governance to unpack it further there.
Okay, I'm content to wait for an answer at governance. Like, I understand that bylaws are living documents, like most of what we deal with. So I'm happy to just continue on and figure it out as we proceed. I don't think anything will turn on it. So I appreciate that thing. And I appreciate Trustee Crawford's comments too. Thank you.
With that, I'm going back to page 69, section 10, electronic meetings. Are there any other concerns, etc., with pages 69 and 70? We don't see any, except Trustee Lundquist.
Yeah, I don't have a concern. I just have a practical question, which is, if we move back into in-person meetings, do we have the ability to do hybrid meetings in a reasonable way? And I ask that because I've watched some other meetings that have been done recently vis-a-vis sort of hybrid type models, and they're not very successful. So I'm just wondering, do we have the capacity to actually do that?
So you, just to clarify, Trustee Lundquist, the technical capacity to be able to conduct hybrid meetings?
Yes.
Yes, and not sure who I can turn that to on staff, who's not looking away from me, who wants to answer that. Director Marsh. Our IT specialist, Director Marsh.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Actually, I see that Executive Lead Sir Janik has turned his camera on, so I'm going to happily turn it to him, actually.
All right, we'll turn to you, Robert.
Thank you. And through the chair, we do have the ability to conduct hybrid meetings for both board and standing committee meetings. It does require a little bit of advance notice because of the staff involved in it, but we are able to do so.
May I ask a simple supplemental, please,
Yes,
Mr.
please
Chair?
do. Please do.
So that's good to know. And it's also good to know that it requires some advance notice. So if we did that, we could still conduct votes. There would be like all of the things that we need to do to conduct the business of the board, we would be able to do, yes?
Yes, that's correct. It would look a little bit different than as we're meeting right now, or if you were meeting in person, but yes, we'd be able to do all the same, and you'd be able to see folks who are both online and in person.
Okay, thank you. I'm not trying to, you know, go at this to death. It's just one of the things that always worries me is when we pass rules, but we don't actually have a way to make them function. So as long as you're telling me we can, then I'm satisfied with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. That concludes the bylaws. I was going to turn to the Trustee Code of Conduct, which commences on page 132. According to my pages anyway that I'm working with. So I was going to be able to work through, and what I was going to suggest is, I think it's 132, am I right? 31, 32, oh, I got my pages all backwards. You caught up now. What we'll do is we'll work through, I would suggest we do work through the same. We'll do it kind of sections by section. Part 1, part 2. I know some of them are smaller, but then we could work through because there's a number, like section 6 is very, very long. What I'll try and do is just break it up into sections so that we can look at it. Anticipating Trustee Crawford, you had said you were going to hold some of your debate for the Code of Conduct. So So I'm just starting on top of page 132. I'm just looking at purpose and application, the section 1, 1.0 to 1.5. Any questions with regards to this section? Okay, just looking at sections 2, 3, and 4, objective, reasonability, and application of scope. Any questions? Okay, definitions, section 5. Fairly short. Okay, let's take a look at section 6, 6.1, 6.2, just the code of conduct. 6.1, 6.2. Any questions, comments? Integrity and dignity of the office, the principles. Let's take a look, and that's on 133. We'll look through 6.3 to 6.13 up to confidential information. Integrity and dignity office principles. Any questions or commentary with regards to the proposed code of conduct on that section? Confidential information, take a look at that section, 6.14 to 6.20 on the definition of confidential information. Upholding decisions, 6.21 to 6.25. Gifts, benefits, and hospitality. Just at the bottom of 6.26 through to page 137, conflict of interest. Any questions on the definitions or description of gifts, benefits, and hospitality? Not seeing any. Looking at conflict of interest, 6.3 to 6.32. Use of board property services and other resources, 6.33. Election campaign work, 634, 635. Improper use of influence, 636 and 37. Conduct regarding current and prospective employment. Conduct at board and committee meetings, and conduct respecting staff members, 640 to 6.43. Discreditable conduct, 6.4445. Failure to adhere to board policies and procedures, 6.46. Reprisals and obstruction, 6.4748. The section on acting on advice of integrity commissioners, 649 through to the end of 6.39, 49, sorry, the bottom 6.49 to 6.52. Acting on the advice of the integrity commissioner, Nikki. Trustee Lundquist, sorry.
No apology required. I answer to both things. I apologize because I would like to go back to 6.47, reprisals and obstruction. And I'm just not getting my hand hit quickly enough. So my only concern here is the language of should. So to me, this should be directory, not permissive language. I think it should say are required or must. And I say that because it's to respect the integrity of the code of conduct and to cooperate with inquiries. I don't think that's a matter of you should. I think it's a matter of we must. I think that is a minimum obligation in my mind. And I've struggled with the language of should a little bit, understanding that people tend to prefer permissive language, but I don't think it's appropriate in this particular section, just because reprisals and obstruction will completely undermine the code in and of itself. So I would actually like to move to amend the language of should to must.
Okay, we have an amendment on the table under 6.47 that trustees must respect the integrity of the code of conduct, et cetera, as per that section. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Trustee Morton, discussion to that amendment. Any opposed to that amendment? Please indicate. Okay, I see no objections. So that will be the first amendment when we come back to the broader whole. Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. Acting on the advice of the Integrity Commissioner. And then the last part was sanctions. 7.1. Okay. The next section is starting on page 141, Appendix 1. It speaks to the appointment of the selection jurisdiction of the Integrity Commissioner. Let's look at sections 1 and 2, the appointment and the selection of. So 1.0 to 2.1. Okay, the role of the Integrity Commissioner, which would be section 3. Top of page 143, appendix number 2, which is the complaints protocol. Let's just look at sections 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is the rationale, objective, definitions, and complaint protocol. Trustee Crawford.
Does it have to be in that format, even if it was put in by a private citizen, or can the IC accept it in a different form?
Council Cotter, did you want to just take that one?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the Integrity Commissioner can only receive complaints under this complaint protocol, or as may be referred to by the Board of Trustees, if a member brings it directly to the board and the board decides to investigate by referring it to the Integrity Commissioner. So it would have to be a complaint, either an informal or formal complaint under this protocol for the Integrity Commissioner to properly receive it and investigate.
So that if anybody has a complaint, whether it goes to the board or whether it goes to the IC, it must be done in that format. And if it's not, it'll be returned or just asked to correct it.
So just to clarify, but no one other than a board member can bring a complaint to the board. Anyone other than a board member must go only through the Integrity Commissioner. And they could not bring a complaint directly to the Board of Trustees. If the complaint is not proper, then the Integrity Commissioner would, in the normal course, respond in some fashion to the complainant, saying, you know, this is not a proper complaint. I cannot proceed to assume jurisdiction over the complaint.
So trustees are, if they're making a complaint, it has to be to the board.
Trustees have the statutory right under section 218.3 to bring a complaint to the board, but they also, under this code of conduct, may elect to bring a complaint directly to the Integrity Commissioner. It's at the trustees' election.
I don't find that anywhere in the Education Act.
The Education Act does provide a statutory right on a member to bring a complaint directly to the Board of Trustees. The Education Act does also require the board to adopt a code of conduct. And in adopting the code of conduct, the board can appoint an integrity commissioner to investigate and report on complaints. And it's open to the Board of Trustees to make that open to trustees to proceed, through that process, which is what our code of conduct did. And this amendment doesn't change that fact.
Well, our code of conduct seems to allow that a trustee making a complaint can go directly to the IC.
That's correct. Both the old version and this version do that. And they also preserve the statutory right under 218 to go directly to the board.
Okay, that's something I'd like to spend some time on because I can't find anywhere in the law. The only thing I can find in the law is that it must be made to the board.
Well, just the Education Act says a member may bring a complaint to the Board of Trustees.
Well, the reason, if I may, if we could go back and forth for a second, Patrick, I would appreciate it. It says may because
through the chair, Trustee Crawford, please, though, right? So this isn't a singular conversation, please. So go ahead.
Oh, thank you for the interruption in my thoughts.
Oh, Trustee Crawford, come on now.
Oh, Trustee Barrett.
We are working together here. Go on.
We are okay. The word may is in there because they may or may not. In other words, you must. There's no must or should in there. The reason the word may is in there is because the person might choose not to make a complaint to the board, but there's only one avenue to make a complaint for a trustee, and that's to the board.
Well, I mean, that's an interpretation that's open to you to make, Trustee Crawford. I disagree. I think that there's nothing in the Education Act that would preclude a Board of Trustees from adopting a code of conduct that would allow a member to raise a complaint with the Integrity Commissioner. That's the code of conduct that this board currently has in place, as do many other boards.
I guess the question then becomes, there's nothing in the Education Act that says that a board needs to have an IC. Most boards don't have an IC.
Through you, Chair Barrett, that's correct.
And some boards have been mandated by the Ministry of Education to have an IC.
But not this one.
No, definitely not.
So I'm only going by the letter of the law because one thing I've learned is that when something is written clearly, you should learn to accept it. And if there's anything that's clear in the Education Act is that the complaints go to the board.
May go to the board, yeah.
If you choose to. It doesn't say it may go somewhere else.
No.
Anyway, let's not argue about it. I think I've made my point.
I was going to move on to other speakers, Trustee Lundquist and then Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. So I just want to speak to this idea of an IC and the code of conduct because we're on the topic. And I think this is really a critical piece of this discussion. And the reason I think it's a critical piece of this discussion is because I work in a field where people have to file complaints often, and they shouldn't have to go to the people they're filing complaints against. So the idea that we wouldn't have an IC is a little bit alarming to me, frankly, because that's a silencing mechanism of people. So I'm not suggesting that on this particular iteration of this particular board, those are the kind of issues that can't be addressed, but it could happen. And that could happen when you're talking about racism. It could be happening when you're talking about assault or sexism or misogyny or a whole bunch of isms that exist. And it would create just such a situation of discomfort that people would be disinclined to speak about their experiences. And I'm not going to support something that doesn't actually have an IC. So if that is the suggestion, I think it's wrong. And I think it's wrong because it has such a chilling impact. But beyond that, I just want to say that You know, I have read a lot of law in my lifetime, and may is a permissive word. And just because it says you may go to the board, it doesn't mean you're required to do that directly. There is an alternate path. It was in the old bylaws. It continues to be in this bylaw. There's nothing improper about it whatsoever. There is no language precluding it. So I don't see it as being improper, but I also see it as being vitally important in terms of giving people space to speak about their experiences and the things that they find to be upsetting in terms of behavior of trustees. And I just want to really observe that I think the addition of an IC is a level of accountability for all trustees, and a vitally important one as we go forward in the world. Like this, the world is rapidly advancing in terms of our knowledge, in terms of our understanding of sort of the legal lay of the land and whatnot. And the idea that we would not have somebody who has experience in these particular areas and who can speak to them and guide us appropriately where needed, to me, it would be a concern and just not something I would be willing to support. I would vote no against bylaws that didn't contain these kinds of provisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. Any further commentary on this section? We're talking 1 to 4.0. Trustee Edwards?
You somewhat addressed it, Michael, Trustee Barrett, and somewhat what Trustee Lundquist said as well. It's just that, there have been boards that have been taken over by the ministry, although it doesn't say there has to be integrity commissioner. Most of all the recommendations to those boards that have been taken over is where the Ministry of Education has mandated an integrity commissioner, and they do play an important impartial body, a person away from the board, where trustees or people could make a complaint, either formal or informal, where they would be comfortable instead of taking it to the board. So I agree for it to continue to stay here. It's an important part of the code of conduct and the complaint process.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Moving on to the informal complaint process, section 4. It's a lengthy one. Let's talk just about the informal then on the bottom of page 143 to 144. The informal process.
If I can just comment, I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead, Trustee Crawford. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm in favor of the informal process. In fact, I'm in favor of most of the things that are stated in the code, especially when it gives us options, and most codes are written that way. They'll start with a warning. They'll ask the people to talk to themselves. They'll ask somebody else to intervene. So there's a few steps that can solve problems before you go to a direct complaint. And my feeling about going to the board is that if you went to the board and you didn't get the reaction that you should have gotten, then you have the option of going outside to an IC or an ombudsman. But as to the subject we're on now, I like the way the informal one is written.
Thank you, Trustee Crawford. As you quite aptly point out, there are two processes. One is certainly the informal and the formal. So there is the informal mechanism that trustee may decide to utilize, or they may decide to use the formal process as well, which is starts on the top of page 145 at 4.2. Questions or concerns on the formal, which runs up to 4.3, which outlines the formal complaint process. Section 4.3 is a classification of complaints by the Integrity Commissioner. Talks about the different acts that it may fall under, the different legislation. On page 147, 4.4, reports to the Integrity Commissioner, no jurisdiction or inquiry. And then 4.5 outlines the formal complaint inquiries by the Integrity Commissioner. For any questions, amendments? And then 4.8, pardon me, 4.8, 4.6 is the reports to the Board of Trustees. Talks about the time frame and the actions that is necessary. And 4.7, payment of costs. It runs through on page 150. Trustee Crawford.
Costs. Maybe we should save this for the audit committee, but I noticed on some of the reports that are published that the cost is also published, and that's something that we need to be conscious of, because as soon as we bring the outside person in, the IC, we begin to spend taxpayer dollars. And one of the things that is clear in the Education Act is our responsibility about taxpayer dollars and to make sure they go towards student achievement. So we need to have regular reports on what this is costing us, and probably a report on what the probable costs could be, because my understanding is that if it gets into the hands of an IC, it can be hundreds of dollars an hour. And maybe someone on staff could comment on what the probable costs are when we go to the IC and what they have been up until now. And I would be happy, Mr. Chair, to put that on the agenda for the audit committee as well.
Well, or potentially a finance piece, etc. But certainly at this point, I think Trustee Crawford, to build on what you're saying on the element, the more that people understand the role, the more people understand the bylaws, the more people understand and are educated upon the elements of the laneways, etc., then there is an opportunity to be able to reduce cost. So that's an important piece of that. So so there's definitely a cost to anything that we do. So that is something that could be taken up at another point, kind of deviates from the discussion tonight, but the concern is duly noted. And there are avenues, to your point, Trustee Crawford, to be able to talk about that cost.
Yeah. Trustee Edwards is here, so we can do it at finance as well.
Yeah. All I would say though is, and from my experience, that an estimate of any cost of anything is never really that, except an estimate. So I'm not sure we can hold anybody accountable for that, because I know that things have a tendency to grow, but your point is well taken. It is taxpayer money. So moving on to 4.8, confidentiality and formal procedures, formal complaints. Sorry, my apologies. Questions, concerns? And just the evaluation and appendices, which has the potential complaint schedule, etc., plus the marked up as well. So that, trustees, concludes the conversation on both the revised draft consolidated bylaws and the code of conduct. We do have one amendment that was made and approved. And I am looking now for discussion on a motion that was placed on the floor, but would have to encompass that the Board of Trustees consider, as it may deem appropriate, approve the amended revised draft consolidated bylaws and code of conduct. Patrick nodded at me, so that's good. So I'll write that in my diary, Patrick. So discussion to that motion. Trustee Crawford.
Just a question. We've already approved the bylaws, correct?
No, we're moving them together, Trustee Crawford, the bylaws and the code of conduct. Yeah.
Oh, could we separate the two?
We certainly could, Trustee Crawford. That's certainly your right. So I would consider then a division of the motion to be able to have that the Board of Trustees considers and may deem appropriate to approve the amended revised draft consolidated bylaws. So I'll need someone to be able to make that motion as a singular motion. Or do I need a motion to divide, Patrick? What is the proper procedure? A motion to divide the two?
I think you should have a motion to divide the question.
Okay. All right. So Trustee Crawford is making a motion to divide. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Trustee Lundquist. Any opposed to any discussion?
The only discussion is I think there's always on division. I think when you're just asking for a division of the vote, it's just on the one person asking for it. Anyway, if there's no opposition to it, then we don't need to discuss it.
Well, as you said earlier, Trustee Crawford, thanks for interrupting me and ruining my flow of information. So,
well, we're almost even.
Touche, Trustee Crawford. So, any objections to the division? So, seeing none. So, I am looking for a motion that the Board of Trustees consider, as it may deem. Oh, pardon me. The Board of Trustees approve the amended revised draft consolidated bylaws. Do I have a mover for that motion? Trustee Lundquist. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Trustee Templeton. Discussion to that motion. I'm seeing none, so without having to move into stadium seating, I'm looking to see if there's any objection to the motion that the Board of Trustees approve the amended revised draft consolidated bylaws. Any objections? Seeing none, we will consider the revised draft. Now it's the consolidated bylaws, no longer a draft, approved. So thank you, trustees, for that. A Herculean approach and effort. And thank you, Patrick, for your continued guidance. We do need, however, a motion to be able to approve that the Board of Trustees approve the draft code of conduct. Do I have a motion? Trustee Edwards to put forward that motion. Trustee Morton as a seconder. Do we have discussion to the motion on the floor? Trustee Crawford.
I'm guessing that the code of conduct also includes the part about the integrity commissioner.
That's correct, Trustee
The
Crawford.
appendix, okay.
Yes, it does. Yeah, yeah.
All right. So I'll be voting against it, but not the code of conduct, not because of the code of conduct.
Right. Any further discussion, questions? So without going to stadium seating, those opposed to the motion that the Board of Trustees approve the draft code of conduct. Okay, duly noted, one against. I'm seeing that as an approval of the revised code of conduct. And again, thank trustees for their very much their efforts in being able to bring this forward and being able to bear with us tonight. And with that, Chair Morton, I'm going to turn it back to you. So.
And I thank you, Trustee Barrett, Chair Barrett, for doing so much work on our code of conduct and our bylaws. Thank you to all. Going back to our recommended actions, we're going to go now to the mileage reimbursement rate, and I would be calling on Associate Director Wright.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It is safe to say that it would be considered a leading practice to regularly review reimbursements such as mileage rates in the spirit of fairness to staff, as well as to reflect the fact that there are potential income tax consequences. Canada Revenue Agency has worked with a number of school boards to guide what they feel is reasonable reimbursement for mileage, and that is listed on page 186 of your package. Obviously, a key component of the consideration is the mileage rate itself. CRA sets a window on an annual basis of reasonable mileage rates. For 2022, the window is between 55 and 61 cents per kilometer. Assuming an average amount of travel for board staff over the year, increasing the rate to the lower end of that range will generate an increase of approximately $36,000 for the calendar year. Included in the report is a recommendation that the board both establish a rate of 55 cents a kilometer for the 2022 calendar year, as well as on a go-forward basis to adjust the mileage rate annually to the lower end of the CRA established window. Happy to answer any questions through you, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Questions for Associate Director Wright? Trustee Edwards.
So just for clarification that it's to, I have no problem with the mileage rate, although it won't do much for the gas rates these days. But the establishment, is there any point in time, even though the rates will be adjusted each calendar year, that boards of trustees could decide maybe they want to change it, that they could bring it to the board? I just want to not preclude the board having that ability to change it or decide not to accept the lower rate if that's possible.
In full transparency, this motion would regularly update the rates on an annual basis. We would update it. It would be done through a motion of trustees and could be undone, is my understanding, through the motion of trustees. So if at any point in time trustees wish to cease the annual rollover of meeting the CRA rate, absolutely within their rights to do so. We could bring a report and provide information at that time.
Further questions? Trustee Barrett.
Yeah, thank you. And again, similar to Trustee Edwards, no issues on the recommendation, but I'm just maybe I'm just been around too long, perhaps, but I always always thought this was part of the budgeting process. Now, was that a couple of years ago, or am I just totally lost track of time and space and reality? So just from a process standpoint.
For sure, Trustee Barrett, thank you. So I don't have a lot of the history. I know the last time that the mileage rate was updated was 2019. I know that the CRA updates their mileage rates on a calendar year, which puts it a little bit before our budget cycle. There is a budget impact certainly to increasing or decreasing the mileage rate. However, in the grand scheme, not overly significant for a $900 million budget. So certainly we could discuss it as part of the budget cycle. It's just a little out of sync with when the CRA updates their rates.
Yeah, and I can certainly appreciate that. We're all kind of dealing with the same thing, whether you're in public education or in private finance. The issue of the changes taking place. I'd be more than pleased to be able to to make the motion endorsing the change in the rates as suggested in the report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And that recommendation is found on page 186. It reads, it is recommended that the mileage reimbursement rate be set at 55 cents per kilometer for 2022 and adjusted to the lower of the two rates established by CRA at the beginning of each calendar year. The motion has been put forward by Trustee Barrett. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Trustee Templeton. Further discussion? I'm seeing no hands up. Then instead of going to stadium seating, I'm simply going to say, please indicate if you are opposed to this motion. Then that motion would be carried. Thank you. Moving on in our agenda. I'm looking at trustee determination and distribution for 2022. And again, we'll call on Associate Director Wright.
Thank you again, Chair Morton. I really hope that there's enough information in the report this evening, starting on page 187 of your package, to allow you to make the decisions around trustee determination and distribution that as this Board of Trustees are required to based on Ontario Regulation 41200. It was a bit of a balancing act because there is quite a volume of information we could have included in the report. So try to keep it succinct. So Ontario Regulation 412/00 states that it is the responsibility of the outgoing Board of Trustees to make decisions around representation for an incoming board before a municipal election. The decisions mentioned in this report must be made by the end of March in an election year, so this year, and communicated out to the relevant parties by April 4th. Trustee determination covers the number of trustees that will represent constituents on a school board, and trustee distribution relates to the geographic representation within the boundaries of the board. There are a number of factors that can impact the determination for a board of trustees, including board area, population density, and dispersal factor of electors within the district. But for Durham District School Board, the only factor that really impacts trustee determination is the number of electors. On the table in Appendix D of the report, taken from Regulation 41200, there's highlighted the number of trustees eligible to be elected based on the number of electors established to be represented. Based on the Municipal Property and Assessment Corporation data, the organization that is currently responsible for gathering the information, DDSB trustees represent 389,455 electors, which allows for up to 11 elected officials. This number of trustees has not changed since the scale was established in 2006. The general principle of proportional representation is highlighted in the relevant regulation as the premier consideration. The tables and appendices A through C address trustee distribution from across all the municipalities included within the district, with Appendix C highlighting trustee representation compared to the percentage of electors, and Appendix E of the report highlights proportion of representation across the district as it relates to student enrollment. It appears that over the course of the last 4 years, there has been no appreciable proportional change across the district in terms of electors, and therefore there does not appear to be a need to address distribution for the coming election. There are at least 2 motions that need to be considered this evening based on legislation. Though there is another that may be considered that I'll also address. And I'll briefly explain the motions and then turn it back to you, Madam Chair, to moderate any questions that there might be. The first motion under Regulation 41200, boards which are comprised of more than one municipality, such as Durham District, are required to pass a resolution designating one or more municipalities as low population municipalities and directing an alternative distribution or stating that they have decided not to designate any municipality as a low population municipality. Designation of low population areas would allow boards to provide greater representation to rural municipalities than would result from the application of a strict representation by population approach. There was no designation of a low population municipality for the 2018 election. The second required motion must confirm trustee distribution as either status quo or changed. And then under the column of motions that may be made at the discretion of this board, the number of trustees may be reduced to no fewer than 5, though that isn't included as a recommendation in the report. And I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Questions for Associate Director Wright? Trustee Edwards?
This is not really a question, but a comment, and probably one additional recommendation that the Board of Trustees will have to look on around trustee distribution, in particular around for the town of Ajax. The town of Ajax currently is the only municipality that elects its trustees by elects by wards, its councillors by wards. And the trustee election has followed suit. We've gone by wards. Prior to the 2018 election, the town of Ajax changed the number of wards from 4 to 3. The change in the ward boundaries really didn't significantly change the number of schools each of us represented, with Patrice representing wards 1 and 2, myself representing ward 3. So we did not decide to change the geographic representation of wards for election of trustees. But one of our processes is actually to look at the distribution and the equitable representation. According to the PEG report, the electoral ward populations for each of the 3 wards is approximately 1/3. So wards 1 and 2 represents 64% of the electoral population, and wards 3 has 36%. Growth in Ajax is mainly in wards 1 and 2, and it is where schools are being built to accommodate growth. So currently, Trustee Barnes has more schools that she represents, if you wish, if we're looking at schools, than myself. After the last, well, actually not after, but at the very end of March, the town actually sent a letter to the board in 2018 requesting that we consider changing the election of trustees from wards to considered at large for future elections. So with this information, I believe we should look at an additional recommendation to allow for equity of representation, that the Ajax School Board trustees move away from the geographic ward elections to 2 school board trustees for the whole geographic area of Ajax, which is basically electing them at large. So that's also a consideration that the board has. I'm reticent bringing this forward, considering I don't have the additional Ajax trustee, although we have had a preliminary discussions about it. I'm a little bit reticent bringing it forward, but due to timing constraints, if we do this, we have to let the clerks know by the end of basically March. So it's a consideration we have to do.
I have a question for you, Trustee Edwards. Was that changed in 2018? And if so, who made that change?
What changed in 2018?
Where you are, was prior to 2018, did you and Trustee Barnes not represent the whole of Ajax?
No, we've always been represented with ward, but we had 4 wards. So trustee was 1 and 2, and I was 3 and 4. In order to facilitate, they keep the same number of counselors. There was a consultation process with the town of Ajax, and they decided to switch so that they had 1 counselor for one ward counselor and then a regional counselor for each ward. So they moved it to 3. So no consideration was taken around trustees. We can't divide 2 into 3 very well. But as I said, when we looked at it the last time, when it came to the number of schools, there was only 1 school that it actually affected and which area it was represented. Although we still geographically, the way people look at the boundaries, it was always Highway 2. So that's where we left it.
I'm wondering if Council Cotter could advise us on how we proceed, if it's up to us to make that change.
I think the board does have the discretion under Reg 41200 to deal with this matter. I think it's really a combining of the wards would be the way I would word it. So you're leaving the trustee distribution and determination the same, and you're just combining those wards. I think that's within the jurisdiction of the board. I would stay away from from election at large or that kind of language or representation. Really, it's a collapsing or combining of the wards, I think, into a single geographic region with the same number of trustees appointed. So you still have the 2 trustees elected from the now collapsed Ajax wards. Sorry, I shouldn't say the now collapsed, the proposed collapsed Ajax ward. So I think that would be the appropriate way to do it. That would fit within Reg 41200. I don't know if Associate Director Wright has anything to add on that.
Associate Director Wright?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would have said perhaps not so eloquently, but very similar things to what Council Cotter just did.
So then I would go to Trustee Edwards. Are you willing to put forward that motion, Trustee Edwards?
I do have that motion when we look at the motions, and I actually did not include the at large. What I had said is that we move from the geographic wards to the election of 2 school board trustees for the geographic area of Ajax. I don't know if we want to put the 2 in there because that could change. So if that motion stays there, it wouldn't matter. We'd have to change it next time anyway. So
I think that works, Madam Chair, from a legal perspective in terms of matching it with the language in Reg 412.
Thank you. Donna has put forward the motion. We need somebody to second that motion. Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Further discussion. Trustee Forbes, you did have your hand up.
It was more to do with the question about the history of that decision because it predated, but that would bring Ajax similar to how trustee distribution, how we divide the work in Oshawa as well. And we do have ward elections, but it has gone back and forth from councillors at large to ward system back to a ward system here. So that was my only comment, but this seems to make sense to me.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. We have a motion on the table put forward by Trustee Edwards, seconded by Trustee Barrett. Instead of going to stadium seating, I'm simply going to ask, please indicate if you are opposed to that motion. I see no opposition, so that motion has passed. Thank you for bringing that forward, Trustee Edwards. Is there any further discussion? Any further questioning for Associate Director Wright? Michael Barrett.
No further questions, Chair Morton, but there are 2 other motions that would need to be passed. And again, I would like to be able to move under 8.2 that the trustees of the Durham District School Board are not declaring a low population municipality, and that the trustees of Durham District School Board are not requesting a change to the current distribution.
Are you suggesting that we combine those 2 motions into one?
I'm quite fine with having both motions together, but if want to be divided, but here comes trouble. Trustee Edwards has got her hand up. So
Trustee Edwards, I don't think you're trouble at all.
that's okay. I'm just questioning whether we can, because I think under the guide it actually says we have to do both, because if you don't declare that, then you have to go through a different table and a different report. So like a different table in the report that we send. So I think it actually says you actually have to have a motion that says one and then you do the other as well. I might be wrong. Somebody can correct me, but I'm pretty sure you have to have it too.
I rest my case.
It does say to remain status quo for the 2022 election, trustees require the following motions. So I'm asking you then.
Fine,
trustee-
I will make a motion then. The first one, the trustees of Durham District School Board are not declaring a low population municipality.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, trustee Edwards. Questions? Then I will call the vote. Please indicate if you are opposed to that motion. Seeing no opposition, that motion has passed. The second motion then under 8.2 is that the trustees of the Durham District School Board are not requesting a change to the current distribution. Could somebody put forward that motion? Trustee Thatcher, seconded by Trustee Templeton. Questions, comments? Then I will call that vote as well. Please indicate if you are opposed to that motion. I'm seeing no opposition, so the second motion, really it's the third motion, has also passed. Thank you kindly. Moving on in our agendas to our first information item, and we're going to go back to Associate Director Wright, and he's going to bring us up to date on the quarterly construction. Associate Director Wright, and I think we have Lisa back with us. Welcome again, Lisa.
Thank you kindly, Madam Chair, and I will pass it over to Lisa Bianca, Head of Facility Services, to present the report. Okay, thank you and good evening, and through you, Chair Morton. I'm here tonight to share an update on the status of construction and major projects at the board as of December 31st, 2021. At this time, DDSB has approval for 3 new builds and 1 major addition. These projects are in various states of approval, with Beaverton for a rebuild and the unnamed North Oshawa Public School having been submitted to the ministry and awaiting ministry approval to proceed to tender. The Mary Street addition will be submitted for ATP in the very near future. And the unnamed Creekwood Pickering project is currently in design development. We also have 6 capital childcare projects underway. We were pleased to receive both a scope change and approval to proceed to tender for the Von Willard project quite recently. And as well, the Scott Central childcare project was submitted to the ministry back in December for approval, and we await their final approval. Other projects underway, Seneca Trail, Sunderland, and Rosebank all have 3-room childcare additions planned, and they are currently in for floor plan approval with the childcare area within the Ministry of Education. We have many major projects underway and in the planning stages. They are all listed in your package. I won't go into detail. I will comment though that it is a volatile market. We are seeing some areas where we're getting quite competitive pricing. I would say our cladding projects are well within budget. And then we are also seeing challenges, some of our roofing projects and all of that. It's a tough market right now, both from the perspective of material availability driving up costs, as well as even just availability of contractors. And this extends into our ventilation projects as well. We have a number of quite a few projects underway or planned. Our target has been to address mechanical ventilation in schools that either are underventilated or don't have ventilation, and these are always our priority. Moving on from that, I am happy to take questions from anybody.
Questions, comments? Trustee Stone.
Thank you. Just a comment around could you please just describe what an inclusive change room is?
Okay, we are looking at, you're referring to the project at GL Roberts. GL Roberts has basically a vintage change room, from the original build to the school. So it is well overdue for an upgrade. In that upgrade, there will be sensitivity to creating inclusive change spaces. So private changing areas for students that aren't comfortable changing in a large group change room, addressing showering in a more private and inclusive way. Right now, those change rooms have, I'm sure, some of us can remember them from high school, those, shower rooms with the big pole in the middle. There is even a window, it's boarded up from the coach's office into the change room. So the design of those rooms harkens from an area from a time 60 years ago or more, and it's time for them to be updated. So we're doing that in a manner that's sensitive to the needs, the privacy, and the inclusiveness for all students.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa.
Are there further questions or comments for Lisa? Michael Barrett, Trustee Barrett.
Very quick question, and thank you for the update. Lots of exciting things happening. I just want to know, what is the date that I need to circle on my calendar so I can start to cry when the announcements about the funding does come out or does not come out, Lisa? So.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett. I wish I knew. It all hinges on when the ministry goes into hiatus before the election. We anticipate that will be sometime in April. We are hoping it is later rather than earlier, but until we hear that, we are still hopeful. We're on the edge of the schedule. I wouldn't I wouldn't downplay that. Every week counts at this point, but we're not willing to concede at this point. We will bring an update in the June quarterly with a fully updated schedules, because at that point we will know definitively where we are. So cross your fingers. We're hoping something comes out, as well as the new capital priorities announcements. So.
Well, that's certainly the one I'm looking for, is the capital priorities announcement, and I hope they don't go into hiatus too deeply, Lisa, and forget about it's got to be 6 times lucky. Isn't that the phrase? So.
Oh, I hope so. We have been in contact with ministry staff, and they have been reaching out and asking questions about the capital priorities submissions, digging for more information, really. So we know they are being reviewed, and we are hopeful that the intention is to see some approvals, but no guarantees. I can't speak for them.
Well, I know you can offer no guarantees. I'll just keep looking forward to the date. So.
And I'm sure that Trustee Barrett and I, many of us, will be keeping our fingers crossed, our arms crossed, our toes crossed. We are still hopeful. Thank you, Lisa, for spending the evening with us.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on, bell time review. And I think Kelly Michulin has been waiting for us as well. Kelly?
Hello, thank you.
Hello, Kelly. Sorry to keep you waiting, Kelly.
That's okay. Through you, Madam Chair, DSTS is pleased to provide an update on the proposed bell time changes and the public consultation process that happened during February. So on February 10th, the bell time review consultation process was launched. That was with both partner boards. And on February 15th, and February 16th, DSTS and the member boards hosted 2 virtual public consultation sessions. And through the online survey and thought exchange, which closed on February 25th, we had 3,310 responses through the survey and thought exchange. DSTS and the partner boards we're currently reviewing all of the feedback received. But during the initial review of the feedback, several of the participants and feedback associated with the 8 a.m. secondary school starts, they expressed an interest
and the schools being further surveyed with the choice between a bell time of 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. or a 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. bell time. Stakeholders of the following proposed 8 a.m. Secondary schools will be surveyed for a preference between the 8 a.m. and the 10 a.m. start. And those schools include Brooklyn High School, Donald A. Wilson, O'Neill, Pickering High School, Pine Ridge, and Port Perry High School. The intent is to start the preparation of the survey this week for distribution to the above mentioned school communities. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Kelly. Questions for Kelly? And we will go to Trustee Forbes.
Thank you very much for Madam Chair, and thank you for outlining the process. I guess I just, I'm concerned specifically about O'Neill, simply because, and really any high school that might have special programs like the arts program running at O'Neill, where it services students from the district. So moving to an 8 a.m. bell time, and I understand that this is fraught with difficulties either way, and I'm glad we're consulting the community, but it could pose a real access problem for people who are out of the district if an 8 a.m. bell time is chosen there. And, you know, equity to arts education and access is quite important. So I just want us to be mindful of that.
Thank you, Darlene. Moving on to Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. I appreciate the sort of the process that you're doing for the other high schools that are changing, you know, between the 8 and the later times. I'm just concerned because where if there's going to be any more consultation, because we do have a study or comments, a report from the community neighborhood that got it from the region around traffic flow with the current time of the 4 o'clock stop at Ajax High School. And then the proposed change for that school to 9:30 start and a 3:30 ending time. And with St. Bernadette, just a couple of meters down the road, that only being 5 minutes earlier as far as a start time and an end time, the congestion on Bailey and the ability to turn left out of that parking lot is really, really difficult. The amount of what's happening is people are traveling either south on turning on Burchard and doing a U-turn, which also creates an issue. And there's huge concerns that Bailey and that intersection of Harwood and Bailey is just phenomenal when traffic is there. The traffic actually lines up from Burchard to Harwood, just trying to get down through that process at a busy time. And so I have huge concerns with Ajax staying at a later start. Even 15 minutes earlier would make a big difference. So I just want to, when you're looking at the considerations, to really look at that, and I can provide you with a report from the region as well. They can't change the time signals on the lights that are there, and it's an accident waiting to happen. So I really consider looking at the Ajax High School times, and especially making a bigger separation between Bernadette and St. Bernadette and Ajax High School. But you know, 15 minutes early, because starting at 3 o'clock, Bailey is a zoo. I avoid it like a plague.
Kelly, would you like to respond to Trustee Edwards?
Well, I think that the majority of the traffic is associated with, you know, traffic patterns within the area. However, a good chunk of the Ajax boundary is actually, it's actually south of Bailey. that's actually where the majority of our buses go. But it's certainly something that we will take a look at further.
Thank you. Moving on to Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you, Chair Morton. I just wanted to say thank you. I know, like, I've struggled a little bit with DSTS in terms of having to set schedules around busing as opposed to needs of students, and puzzling over the way busing decisions are made, not because of DSTS, but because of the way the government funds transportation. But I did want to say thank you, because one of the things that was consistently raised by constituents in Whitby, and I'm not going to presume what the constituents coming from Donald A. Wilson or Brooklyn High are going to say about the change potentially in the time, although certainly concerns were raised about that as well. But what really I think was important from a lot of parental perspective, at least, was that there was a situation of inequity potentially brewing in Whitby in terms of access to after school programs and sports and jobs for kids who needed to go to school. And so the big gap between some of them starting at 8 and some of them starting at 10 was perhaps embedding some of those inequities a little bit in ways that were concerning to some in the southern part of Whitby. So I just wanted to say I appreciate that more questions are being asked about that, about those start times for the other two schools, because I do think it would be preferable to come up with something that is more equal in terms of start times in all of the high schools, so that children who need access to employment for university, et cetera, have similar points of access. So thank you for that.
Are there any further questions for Kelly? If not, I simply say, Kelly, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to the results of the survey. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Moving on, we have our SEAC report. I'm going to go back to Trustee Edwards for that SEAC report.
The report from January 20th SEAC can be found on pages 209 to 218. And that is my report, Chair Morton.
Thank you, Donna. Moving on, Trustee Barnes is not here to provide the OPSPA report.
Chair Morton?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just had a quick question around SEAC.
Certainly. Sorry.
Thank you.
Should have asked.
Thank you. I don't want to catch anybody off guard, but I was just reading around the nursing shortage. So I just wondered whether or not our board also considers nursing assistants where we don't need, where the nursing assistants could maybe do the same job as a nurse. There seems to be a real shortage. So I just wondered, and I also was reading that the supports are coming from one community organization. Is this, are there other organizations that we could pull nurses from? I realize it's probably a province-wide shortage, but I just wonder if there were other community organizations that we could get nurses from, and whether or not we can use it, nursing assistants.
I'm just thinking, would Superintendent Macaulay like to answer that? Andrea?
Thank you, and through you, Trustee Stone, thank you for the question. Our nursing care is provided by community partners, so the DDSB does not currently employ any nurses, and we work with our community partners to try and mobilize that support. There are some complexities if the boards were to consider hiring nurses, such as anybody doing regulated health acts requires within profession management and clinical supervision. So it wouldn't just be nurses, it would all of a sudden be the requirement for nursing managers and an entire staffing infrastructure. So that's where we do lean to our community partner. They are funded, and we do have a few nurses that are provided both through private contracts and some smaller organizations as well. Most of them come through our partners in community nursing. But again, it's a relationship between what was formerly the Integrated Health Network over to partners in community nursing and then into our schools and in consultation with families. But you are correct, it is not just a Durham-based need, but a provincial one. And so the ministry did enact where the boards could consider. But where we didn't move on that is the pull would have been from nursing care that the kids were accessing in the 18 hours outside, like in the 17, 18 hours outside of schooling, and we would be pressuring families that were already overwhelmed in other parts of their week. And so we kept working with the systems to try and get full nursing complement, and have been generally fairly successful. We have 2 students who are in a bit of a precarious situation that way, but the rest, their nursing care is fully in place at this time.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions regarding the SEAC report? Then I'm looking at 14D, and that's the OPSPA report. Trustee Patrice Barnes not here, so I'm just wondering if Trustee Thatcher would like to provide that report, or Trustee Edwards.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I am present, but I came in late, so I think
Trustee Barnes, welcome. Sorry, I didn't see your name there.
No, that's okay. I came in late, so I'm sure. I think Christina was going to present that. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you for that, Trustee Barnes. Chair Morton, I did ask Trustee Edwards if she would take care of that tonight, which she kindly has done. So I think we can call on her for this report as well as the in-camera one.
Thank you.
Okay, so the OPSPA report is that we last met virtually on February 25th and 26th. The Friday night, the Board of Directors participated in the EDI professional development, and a draft EDI work plan was provided for his feedback. The work plan actually focused on recommendations from the ED audit that we had completed. The Saturday, we discussed education funding, basically B and SB ministry memos, and the GSN announcement, legislative updates, provincial budget consultation, provincial elections, which basically will take place on June 2nd or before. If the June 2nd election date remains, the writ will have to be dropped by May 4th. So municipal elections, we also talked about, in that we're working with the OPSPA is working with the Ontario Education Services Corporation to revise the resources including a candidate guide for trustees, and the school board elections website that we previously had for the last election. It was the only place you could actually see where trustees got elected, because sometimes trustees are kind of somewhat forgotten when it comes to reporting that information. Transitioning from COVID-19 school experience discussion paper was received. There was over 8,000 responses to that report and that discussion paper, and the report was posted on OPSPA, and this data and other research papers will use to be informed future OSPA education discussions. We also talked about the specialist high school major nonprofit stream, education stream, which was an initiative that was led by OPSPA and has identified it as one of a high leverage strategy where the FSL market partnership can take advantage of. And the goal would be to encourage existing students who have considered teaching, specifically encouraging those students that are in core FI or extended French, and those with lived experience, to ensure that our future teachers reflect our communities. We also, Project Compass, which is a governance project, is winding down, and the Board of Directors endorsed over 40 actions that basically clarify and formalize governance structures, roles, and responsibilities, priority settings, policy development, and succession planning, onboarding and communications, there was a lot done in that project, and it was a significant undertaking. The AGM is being held in person in Ottawa from June 9th to 11th. The call for nominations for the elected positions for UPSPA have now been sent out to our members and are due May 10th. And that is my report.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. I see a question from Trustee Thatcher. Christine?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. It's not really a question. I just wanted to thank Trustee Edwards for preparing that, and with very, very short notice. So I just wanted to express appreciation for that.
Thank you to all. And I'm looking at our agenda, and we are coming to the end of that agenda. I do want to remind all trustees, though, that we are going to reconvene in a private meeting following this public meeting. Our Council Cotter will be joining us, as will Kathy, and hopefully we can move directly if you want to take a 5-minute break. But I'm looking at the time and it's 9:45, so we don't have a lot of time. We will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.